What kind of man walks away from a billionaire, a mansion, and a future most people would beg for without looking back? Before we answer that, tell us where in the world you are watching from, and what time it is where you are right now, because somewhere tonight, a father is being asked to prove what love really means. The ballroom inside the Hartwell estate glittered beneath 3 crystal chandeliers, each one casting warm light over 200 guests dressed in black silk, tailored tuxedos, and quiet expectation. Beyond the tall windows, winter pressed against Greenwich, Connecticut, covering the 12-acre property in a thin layer of snow. Inside, champagne glasses waited on silver trays, cameras faced the marble staircase, and a string quartet played softly beneath a wall of white roses. This was supposed to be the night Evelyn Hartwell announced her engagement to Adrian Cole. Instead, it became the night every person in that room learned the difference between wealth and worth. Adrian stood near the center of the ballroom in a simple black suit that had cost less than the cuff links worn by most of the men watching him. He was 40 years old, broad-shouldered, calm, and still enough to make the room feel louder around him. Across from him stood Evelyn Hartwell, billionaire CEO of Hartwell Development, her hand resting near the diamond ring Adrian had placed there 3 weeks earlier. Her expression was controlled, but her eyes were not. They moved past Adrian toward the entrance, where his 9-year-old daughter Maya stood beside 2 security officers, clutching the straps of her backpack. She looked too small beneath the towering doorway, her blue dress wrinkled at the waist and one braid beginning to come loose. On a table near Charles Hartwell sat a small black flash drive that had been discovered inside her bag less than 10 minutes earlier. Charles, Evelyn's father and chairman of the company, had already called it corporate theft. Natalie Pierce, the communications director, had called it proof. Adrian had called it impossible. But when he asked Evelyn whether she believed his daughter, she had remained silent. Now that silence had grown into something far more dangerous. Cameras from 3 business networks were still recording. Board members watched from behind carefully neutral faces. Charles stood beside his daughter with one hand folded over the other, looking less like a concerned father than a man waiting for a contract to be signed. Evelyn drew a slow breath. When she spoke, her voice carried across the ballroom without effort. "Choose me or your daughter." The quartet stopped. A server froze with a tray balanced against his palm. Somewhere near the back of the room, a woman whispered Adrian's name. Everyone expected him to argue. Some expected him to apologize. A few believed he would send Maya away, accept the Hartwell name, and convince himself that sacrifice was the price of entering a world built for people richer than him. Adrian looked at Evelyn for several long seconds. Then he turned toward Maya. Her chin trembled, but she did not cry. That was what broke something inside him. Not the accusation, not the cameras, not even Evelyn's demand, but the sight of his little girl trying to make herself smaller so he would not have to lose anything because of her. Adrian reached for the ring on his finger. He removed it slowly and placed it inside an untouched glass of champagne. The diamond slipped beneath the surface with a quiet sound that somehow reached every corner of the room. "There was never a choice," he said. Then he walked past Evelyn, past Charles, and past the people who had already decided what kind of man he was. He reached Maya, knelt to her height, and held out his hand. She took it immediately. Behind them, Charles Hartwell's voice cut through the silence. "Lock the doors." 4 months earlier, Adrian Cole had no reason to believe Evelyn Hartwell would ever learn his name. At 7:15 on a gray Monday morning, he stood on the 32nd floor of an unfinished apartment tower in Bridgeport, Connecticut, studying a steel support bracket that did not match the approved plans. Wind moved through the open structure, carrying the smell of rain and wet concrete across the floor. Below him, workers prepared for the day while trucks backed into the fenced construction yard. The building was part of the Hartwell Community Renewal Project, a public promise to create safe, affordable housing for hundreds of families. Adrian had been hired as the senior safety manager, a position important enough to carry responsibility, but ordinary enough to keep him away from cameras and boardrooms. He preferred it that way. He ran one finger along the edge of the bracket, then checked the serial number against the report on his tablet. The steel had been purchased from a cheaper supplier. Its load rating was below the required standard. Someone had changed the materials after approval and hoped no one would look closely enough to notice. Adrian looked closely at everything. By 8 o'clock, The project supervisor was standing beside him with a nervous expression. "We have the dedication ceremony on Friday," the man said. "The mayor is coming. Investors are flying in. We cannot delay the opening over one shipment." Adrian kept his eyes on the bracket. "It is not one shipment. There are 46 of these installed between this floor and the roof." The supervisor lowered his voice. "Sign the inspection report. We can replace them after the ceremony." Adrian finally looked at him. "Families will be moving into this building next month. I will not sign my name under something I would not let my daughter sleep beneath." By 9:30, Evelyn Hartwell arrived in a black sedan with two executives, an attorney, and Natalie Pierce, the company communications director. Evelyn crossed the unfinished floor in a cream-colored coat and practical boots, her expression controlled but impatient. She had spent 6 years expanding Hartwell Development into one of the largest privately held real estate companies on the East Coast. People usually stepped aside when she entered a room. Adrian did not. She stopped several feet from him. "Mr. Cole, I understand you have suspended construction." "I suspended work above the 31st floor. The ceremony is in 4 days." "Then the ceremony should be postponed." Natalie glanced at the supervisor as though waiting for him to correct Adrian. No one spoke. Evelyn held out her hand for the inspection report. She read it quickly, then looked up. "Our engineering consultant approved these materials." "Your consultant approved different materials," Adrian said. "These were substituted after his review." A quiet tension settled over the floor. Evelyn was not accustomed to being contradicted in front of her staff, especially by a man wearing a faded safety vest and work boots dusted with concrete. "Do you understand what a delay will cost this company?" she asked. Adrian closed the tablet and met her eyes. "Do you understand what one failure could cost the families who trust your name?" For several seconds, only the wind moved between them. Evelyn could have fired him. Everyone present seemed to expect it. Instead, she ordered an independent inspection. By sunset, the report confirmed every detail Adrian had found. 46 brackets had to be replaced. The ceremony was postponed. That evening, Adrian left the site without waiting for recognition because Maya had a school presentation at 6:30 and he had promised to sit in the front row. Evelyn watched his old pickup truck leave the construction yard and realized he had risked his job without asking for credit, money, or protection. It was the first time in years that someone had told her no without trying to embarrass her, impress her, or gain something from her. She did not know it yet, but that quiet refusal was the moment her carefully controlled life began to change. By the time Adrian reached Jefferson Elementary School, the rain had turned the sidewalk silver and the parking lot was nearly full. He entered the auditorium 2 minutes before Maya stepped onto the stage. Still wearing his work shirt beneath a clean jacket, he kept folded behind the seat of his truck. She found him in the front row immediately. The nervousness left her face, and Adrian understood again why no meeting, promotion, or powerful name would ever matter more than keeping a promise to his daughter. Maya Cole was 9 years old, observant in the quiet way children become observant after loss. 6 years had passed since her mother, Camille, died after a long illness, but traces of her remained throughout their small home. Her favorite mug sat above the kitchen sink. Her blue scarf rested in the hall closet. Adrian still kept the final voice message she had recorded for Maya, although he only played it on birthdays and on the hardest nights. Their mornings followed a dependable rhythm. Adrian burned toast while trying to braid Maya's hair. Maya corrected him without mercy, and they left the house at 7:20 with her backpack, his coffee, and at least one forgotten item waiting on the kitchen counter. Their life was not luxurious, but it was steady. Maya trusted steady things because steady things did not disappear without warning. 3 days after the inspection, Evelyn appeared at the construction site again. She thanked Adrian in front of no one, which he respected more than a public speech. Then she began finding reasons to visit. She reviewed safety reports she could have read from her office. She asked questions about materials, worker schedules, and the families expected to move into the building. Adrian answered professionally and left at 5 o'clock each afternoon. Evelyn noticed that too. One Thursday, a delayed meeting made Adrian late for school pickup. He arrived to find Maya sitting beneath the front awning beside Evelyn, who had been visiting the principal about a Hartwell education grant. Maya held a cardboard model of a city block across her knees. One corner had collapsed. Evelyn was holding the missing piece while Maya explained, with great seriousness, why every neighborhood needed trees, a library, and apartments that ordinary families could afford. Adrian slowed as he approached them. Evelyn looked strangely out of place on the painted wooden bench, her expensive coat gathering drops of rain, but Maya seemed comfortable enough to keep talking. On the drive home, she was quiet for nearly a mile. Then she asked, "Is Miss Hartwell your friend?" Adrian kept his eyes on the road. "She is my employer." That was not my question. He glanced at her and saw Camille's stubborn expression looking back at him. "I am still figuring that out," he said. Maya turned toward the window. 2 weeks later, Evelyn offered to drive her home when Adrian was delayed by an emergency inspection. Maya agreed, but only after confirming that her father had approved it. Inside Evelyn's car, the city passed in blurred lights while Maya held her repaired model carefully in her lap. "Are you going to take my dad away?" she asked. Evelyn looked at her through the rearview mirror. The question was simple, but it opened a room inside her that she had kept locked since childhood, a room where a little girl once waited beside a suitcase for a mother who never returned. "No," Evelyn said quietly. Maya studied her reflection. People say no when they mean not yet. Evelyn had negotiated billion-dollar contracts without hesitation, but she had no answer for that. When they reached the house, Adrian was waiting beneath the porch light. Maya climbed out, ran to him, and wrapped both arms around his waist. Evelyn watched him kneel, apologize for being late, and listen as though her fear deserved his full attention. In that moment, Evelyn understood that she was not competing for Adrian's love. She was being measured by the safety Maya felt inside it. Over the next 6 weeks, Evelyn entered Adrian and Maya's life through spaces too ordinary to impress anyone and too honest to hide inside. There was the narrow waiting area outside Maya's classroom, where Evelyn sat beside Adrian on a plastic chair while children rushed past carrying construction paper and glue. There was the 24-hour diner near the construction site, where Adrian ordered coffee and Evelyn discovered that no one cared how many buildings she owned when the waitress was ready to close her section. There was Adrian's old pickup truck, which rattled above 50 miles per hour and had a passenger window that only opened if someone pushed the button twice. And there was the small kitchen in Adrian's house, where Maya once attempted to bake chocolate chip cookies and filled the room with smoke because she had mistaken the broiler setting for the oven. Evelyn laughed so hard that tears gathered in her eyes. Maya stared at her for a moment, then laughed too. Adrian stood by the open back door waving a dish towel beneath the smoke detector, watching the two of them with a warmth he did not allow himself to name. Their relationship did not grow through expensive dinners or carefully planned weekends. It grew through small choices. Evelyn remembered that Maya hated raisins but loved strawberries. Adrian noticed that Evelyn stopped checking her phone during dinner when Maya was speaking. Evelyn began visiting the community project without an entourage. Adrian began saving her a cup of coffee when morning inspections started before sunrise. One rainy evening, they stood beneath the unfinished lobby roof while water tapped against the temporary plywood walls. Evelyn told him that her mother had left when she was 7 years old. She did not give details, and Adrian did not ask for them. He only said, "A child remembers who stayed." Evelyn looked toward the street, where headlights moved through the rain. Sometimes the child grows up and still expects everyone to leave. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then the people who care about her have to be patient enough to prove otherwise. It was the closest either of them came to admitting what was happening. Maya noticed before they did. She began leaving a third plate on the table when Evelyn was expected. She stopped asking whether Evelyn intended to take Adrian away and started asking whether Evelyn would attend the school science fair in April. But trust came slowly. One Sunday evening, Charles Hartwell invited Adrian and Maya to dinner at the family estate. The dining room was larger than Adrian's entire first floor, and every place setting looked as if it had been arranged for inspection. Charles barely acknowledged Maya before asking Adrian about his salary, his education, and whether he believed a man in his position could adjust to the responsibilities surrounding the Hartwell name. Adrian answered each question without defensiveness. When a young server spilled water near Charles's sleeve, Charles dismissed her apology with a cold remark about competence. Evelyn looked at the trembling young woman, then set down her napkin. "She made a mistake," she said. "She did not commit a crime." Charles's expression tightened, but Evelyn asked the server to remain and thanked her for replacing the glass. Maya watched the exchange carefully. On the drive home, she leaned toward Adrian and whispered, "She stood up for that lady." Adrian nodded. "Yes, she did." Maya turned toward the window, thinking. A week later, she asked Evelyn to help finish the roof on her model city. They worked at the kitchen table for nearly 2 hours, arguing gently over paint colors while Adrian prepared dinner. By the end of the night, Maya had drawn a tiny garden beside one of the apartment buildings and written 3 names beneath it. Adrian saw his own name, then Maya's, then Evelyn's. He said nothing. Evelyn saw it too and had to look away. 3 days later, she accepted Adrian's proposal in the quiet of the unfinished community center, with no photographers and no board members present. She kissed his cheek, held his hand, and promised she would protect what they were building together. What she did not tell him was that the Hartwell board had already warned her the marriage could cost her control of the company. The engagement announcement was scheduled for the following Saturday, but 3 days before the celebration, Evelyn asked Adrian and Maya to attend a private rehearsal at the Hartwell estate. She said it would help Maya feel comfortable before the ballroom filled with cameras, investors, and people who treated every family moment like a business transaction. Adrian agreed because Maya had already begun worrying about where she would stand, what she should wear, and whether she was expected to call Evelyn anything different after the wedding. The estate was unusually busy that afternoon. Florists carried white roses through the front hall. Technicians tested lights beneath the marble staircase. Staff members moved between rooms with schedules in their hands while Natalie Pierce directed everyone with calm precision. Maya stayed close to Adrian at first, but after an hour of waiting while Evelyn met with board members, she became restless. Ruth Bennett, the longtime Hartwell housekeeper, showed her the library and pointed out a collection of architecture books. Maya carried her tablet because she was recording notes for her model city project. She sat near the window, photographed several old building plans, and began describing what she would add to her neighborhood if money did not matter. She did not notice Natalie enter through the side door. Natalie watched the hallway, crossed to Charles Hartwell's desk, and removed a small black flash drive from her coat pocket. She placed it beneath a folder, waited until Maya stood to reach for a book, then slipped it into the front compartment of the child's backpack. The movement took less than 5 seconds. By the time Maya turned around, Natalie was smiling. "Your father is looking for you," she said. Maya thanked her, picked up her bag, and hurried back toward the ballroom. 20 minutes later, Charles interrupted the rehearsal. His private financial files had been copied, and a secure device was missing from his library. Security closed the estate gates while staff searched every room. Adrian immediately noticed the fear in Maya's face. She had spent enough of her life worrying about losing people to recognize when adults had decided something terrible was about to happen. A security officer opened her backpack in front of Evelyn, Charles, Natalie, and 4 members of the board. The flash drive fell onto the polished table. No one spoke. Maya stared at it as though it had appeared from another world. "That is not mine," she said. Charles asked why she had been alone in the library. Maya explained that Ruth had shown her the books, but Natalie quietly said she had seen Maya near the desk. Then security footage appeared on a wall screen. The video showed Maya entering the library, walking toward Charles's desk, and leaving with her backpack held against her chest. The missing seconds, the moment Natalie entered, had been removed so cleanly that no one questioned what they were seeing. Charles turned to Adrian. "Your daughter accessed a restricted room during a confidential board session." Adrian stepped closer to Maya, placing himself beside her rather than in front of her. She looked at architecture books. She did not steal anything. Natalie lowered her voice with practiced sympathy. The device was inside her bag. Then someone put it there. Charles gave a cold, humorless smile. "And I suppose the cameras are lying too." Adrian ignored him and looked at Evelyn. Everything in the room seemed to narrow around that single moment. "Do you believe Maya?" he asked. Evelyn looked at the flash drive, then at the paused image on the screen. She looked at Charles, whose control of the board could determine whether she remained chief executive officer after the marriage. Finally, she looked at Maya, whose eyes were beginning to fill even though the child refused to let the tears fall. Evelyn opened her mouth, but no words came. The silence lasted only a few seconds. For Adrian, it was long enough to change everything. Adrian did not ask Evelyn the question again. He reached for Maya's backpack, closed the front pocket, and placed it gently over his shoulder. Charles watched him with the calm satisfaction of a man who believed silence had already decided the outcome. "There is a reasonable way forward," Charles said. His tone was measured, almost generous. "The engagement may continue, but the child must remain away from this family until the investigation is complete." Maya lowered her eyes. Adrian felt her fingers tighten around his hand. "Her name is Maya," he said. Charles continued as though he had not heard him. "There is an excellent boarding school in Massachusetts. Secure campus, private rooms, experienced staff. Hartwell Development would cover every expense." Adrian looked at Evelyn. "Did you agree to this?" Evelyn stepped toward him. "I have not agreed to anything. I am trying to prevent this from becoming worse." "For whom?" he asked. She glanced toward the board members waiting near the ballroom doors. "The announcement is in 3 days. Reporters are already asking questions. If we postpone now, my father will call an emergency vote. I could lose control of the company before we even know what happened." Adrian listened without interrupting. When she finished, he nodded once. "Then protect your company. I will protect my daughter." He took Maya home that afternoon, but Charles did not allow the matter to remain private. By Saturday evening, selected details had reached the business press. Headlines described Adrian as an employee involved in a possible security breach. No article mentioned that the missing device had been discovered inside a 9-year-old girl's backpack. Natalie advised Evelyn that canceling the engagement announcement would appear to confirm guilt. Charles insisted that the ceremony proceed. He promised the board that Evelyn would resolve the family issue publicly and permanently. Evelyn spent the hours before the celebration walking between 2 rooms in the estate, one filled with lawyers and executives, the other holding the dress Maya was supposed to wear. She told herself she only needed time. She told herself Adrian would understand the pressure. She told herself that a temporary separation was not abandonment. By the time the ballroom filled, every excuse sounded like a decision she was afraid to name. Adrian arrived because Evelyn had asked him to come, and because he would not allow strangers to define his daughter without facing him. Maya came beside him in the blue dress they had chosen together. Security stopped them near the entrance and asked for her backpack. Adrian refused to let anyone search it without an attorney present. Charles stepped onto the marble staircase and announced that the family needed clarity before the engagement could continue. The room went still. Evelyn descended the stairs slowly, carrying the weight of the board, the company, and every childhood fear she had never learned to release. She stopped in front of Adrian. "If Maya stays with a relative during the investigation, we can still fix this," she said quietly. "She has no relative who replaces me," Adrian answered. Charles moved closer. "Then perhaps Evelyn deserves to know where your loyalty truly lies." Cameras turned toward them. Maya stood near the door, trying to make herself invisible. Evelyn looked at Adrian and asked him to choose. He saw the fear behind her words, but fear did not make the words harmless. He removed the ring, placed it in the untouched champagne glass, and turned toward his daughter. "Any woman who loves me will understand that my daughter is not standing between us," he said. "She is the reason I know how to love at all." Then he walked to Maya and held out his hand. Charles ordered the doors locked, but Evelyn lifted one hand before security could move. She looked at Adrian, then at the child she had failed to defend. "Let them go," she whispered. The doors opened. Adrian and Maya stepped into the winter night together, leaving behind the mansion, the cameras, and a room full of people who had mistaken his quietness for surrender. The first camera crew reached Adrian's neighborhood before sunrise. By 7 o'clock, 2 news vans were parked across from his house, and strangers were standing near the sidewalk pretending not to photograph the front windows. Hartwell Development had suspended Adrian pending an internal review, although no one had interviewed him or Maya. Natalie released a statement describing the situation as a serious breach involving an employee and confidential company property. She did not mention Maya's age. Adrian turned off the television, closed the curtains, and made pancakes because routine was the only thing he could give his daughter that morning. Maya sat at the kitchen table without touching her breakfast. She had worn the same blue sweater for 3 days and had stopped working on her model city. Adrian did not pressure her to speak. He packed her lunch, called the school, and told them she would remain home until the reporters left. Every few minutes, another message appeared on his phone. Some came from co-workers who believed him. Others came from numbers he did not recognize. He answered none of them. Near noon, he found Maya's bedroom door open and her closet half empty. A small suitcase rested on the bed beside the stuffed rabbit she had owned since Camille died. Maya was folding a pair of jeans with the careful seriousness she used whenever she was trying not to cry. "Where are you going?" Adrian asked. She kept her eyes on the suitcase. "Grandma Louise said I can stay with her in Georgia." Adrian stepped into the room. "Grandma Louise did not call me. I called her." Maya placed the jeans inside and reached for a sweatshirt. "You can get your job back. Miss Evelyn can marry you. Everybody will stop being mad." Adrian sat on the edge of the bed. "Look at me, sweetheart." Maya shook her head. "I heard the people outside. They said you lost everything because of me." Adrian waited until she finally faced him. Then he reached into his pocket and removed the engagement ring he had taken from the champagne glass before leaving the estate. He placed it in her palm and gently closed her fingers around it. "This ring is expensive," he said. "That does not make it valuable." Maya looked down at her hand. "But you loved her." "I still do." The honesty surprised her. Adrian continued before fear could turn the words into something cruel. "Loving someone does not mean accepting every choice they make. And loving you is not a sacrifice I made instead of having a life. You are my life. You did not cost me anything worth keeping." Maya's face tightened. "What if she never comes back? Then we will be sad, and we will heal. But I will never teach you that love must be earned by disappearing." Maya set the ring on the bed and leaned into him. Adrian held her while the voices outside faded beneath the steady hum of the heater. Across town, Evelyn stood alone in the room prepared for Maya at the Hartwell estate. The blue dress still hung inside the closet. On the desk lay the model city drawing Maya had made weeks earlier. Adrian and Maya were drawn in dark marker. Evelyn's figure was sketched in pale pencil, light enough to erase with one careless hand. Ruth Bennett found her there after midnight. "She always expected you to leave," Ruth said. Evelyn touched the faint outline of her own face. "I thought I was protecting the company." Ruth looked toward the empty bed. "No, you were protecting the part of yourself that believes leaving first hurts less." Evelyn sat down slowly. For the first time since the ballroom emptied, she allowed herself to understand what Adrian had done. He had not humiliated her. He had shown Maya that no room, no fortune, and no promise of love could make her father abandon her. Evelyn picked up the drawing and noticed a small tablet charger beneath it. Ruth recognized it immediately. Maya had left her school tablet in the library during the rehearsal. Neither woman knew that the device had been recording for nearly 40 minutes, or that inside it waited the truth Charles Hartwell had tried so carefully to bury. Ruth carried Maya's tablet into the library and connected it to the charger. The screen came alive with 12% battery remaining and an unfinished audio file labeled Community Design Interview. Maya had planned to record her own thoughts about neighborhoods, public spaces, and the reasons children needed safe places to grow. Ruth pressed play, expecting to hear the child's voice. At first, there was only the soft scrape of a chair and Maya describing an old set of building plans near the window. Then footsteps entered the room. Natalie's voice followed. She left the backpack open. Charles answered from somewhere near his desk. Then placed the drive and removed the camera segment before the security team begins its review. Ruth stopped breathing. Evelyn reached for the tablet and restarted the recording from the beginning. This time, she listened without moving. Natalie asked whether blaming a child would create too much public sympathy. Charles replied that the story would never be about Maya. It would be about Adrian, an ambitious employee, using his daughter to gain access to the Hartwell family. He said the accusation would force Evelyn to choose between the company and a man the board already considered unsuitable. Then came the sentence that changed the shape of everything. "Once Adrian is gone, destroy the drive," Charles said. "No one can trace the housing transfers back to me without it." Evelyn stared at the small black device now sealed inside an evidence envelope on the desk. The files had not been stolen from Charles. They had been hidden by him. Before sunrise, Evelyn contacted an independent attorney, a forensic accountant, and 3 board members who did not answer to her father. She refused to use the company legal department because Charles had appointed most of its leadership. By 9 o'clock, the preliminary review showed that more than $38 million had been redirected from the Community Housing Fund over 6 years through shell consulting firms. The fund had been created by Evelyn's mother before she disappeared from public life, and Charles had treated it like a private reserve. The affordable housing project Adrian had protected was scheduled to lose nearly half of its long-term maintenance budget after completion. The weak steel brackets had not been an isolated act of negligence. They were one result of years of hidden cuts. Evelyn called an emergency board meeting at the Manhattan headquarters. Charles arrived expecting to remove her as chief executive officer. Natalie sat beside him with prepared statements for the press. Evelyn placed Maya's tablet in the center of the table and played the recording without introduction. Natalie's face lost its careful calm. Charles remained still until his own voice filled the room. When the recording ended, Evelyn distributed the financial reports. "These materials have been delivered to independent counsel and federal investigators," she said. "Natalie Pierce is terminated effective immediately. Charles Hartwell is suspended from all board authority pending a formal investigation." Charles looked at her with disbelief. "You would destroy this family for that man?" Evelyn met his eyes. "You tried to destroy a child to protect yourself." She then announced that she was stepping aside temporarily so no one could claim she had influenced the inquiry. By noon, the company issued a corrected statement clearing Adrian and Maya of all wrongdoing. Evelyn stood before the cameras alone. She did not blame pressure, fear, or her father's manipulation. "I asked the father to separate himself from his daughter because I was too afraid to stand against my own family," she said. Maya Cole was innocent. Adrian Cole told the truth. "I failed them both." That afternoon, Evelyn drove to Jefferson Elementary without security or reporters. She found Maya in the library working silently on her model city while Adrian waited near the door. Evelyn did not approach him first. She walked to Maya, knelt beside the table, and placed the recovered tablet in front of her. "You did nothing wrong," Evelyn said. "I should have believed you before anyone proved it." Maya studied her for a long time. "Do you believe me now because of the recording?" Evelyn swallowed. "I believe the recording because I should have believed you." Maya looked toward Adrian. He did not speak for her. The choice belonged to her. Finally, Maya nodded once, but she did not smile. Evelyn understood. The truth had opened the door, but forgiveness was still standing on the other side. 4 months later, the Hartwell name no longer opened every door without questions. Charles Hartwell had resigned from the board under the terms of a federal agreement, while investigators continued tracing the money removed from the Community Housing Fund. Natalie Pierce had admitted altering the security footage and planting the flash drive in Maya's backpack. The newspapers that once printed Adrian's photograph beside words like suspicion and scandal now described him as the employee whose refusal to approve unsafe construction had protected hundreds of families. Adrian read none of the articles. He returned to the Bridgeport project on a cold Monday morning wearing the same faded safety vest and the same concrete-covered work boots. The company offered him an executive position, a larger office, and a salary that would have changed his life. He declined. "I want my work judged by the buildings that remain standing," he told the new board chair. "Not by the woman I almost married." The damaged brackets were replaced, the missing maintenance money was restored, and the first families moved into the completed apartments before summer. Evelyn did not return to Adrian's home with flowers, expensive gifts, or promises large enough to hide what she had done. She began with smaller things. She attended counseling every Tuesday. She stopped allowing her father's voice to guide decisions he no longer had the right to make. She sent Maya one handwritten apology and did not ask for an answer. When Maya invited her to watch a school presentation, Evelyn arrived early, sat in the back row, and left without approaching Adrian. 2 weeks later, she helped Maya carry art supplies from the school parking lot. The week after that, she repaired the loose roof on the model city without taking control of the project. Trust returned in inches. Adrian noticed every effort, but he refused to confuse effort with repair. One evening, Evelyn stood on his porch while rain gathered along the edge of the roof. "I do not expect you to forgive me because I told the truth after I helped create the lie," she said. "I only want to become someone who would make a different choice before the evidence arrives." Adrian looked through the window at Maya drawing at the kitchen table. "That takes time." Evelyn nodded. "Then I will give it time." She did. Spring came slowly to Connecticut. The trees outside Jefferson Elementary turned green, and Maya completed the final version of her community design project. On the evening of the school exhibition, Adrian sat in the front row beside an empty chair. He had not saved it for anyone. At least, that was what he told himself. Parents filled the auditorium while children waited beside their displays. Evelyn appeared at the rear entrance wearing a simple navy coat, with no assistant, no security detail, and no reporters. She remained near the wall because she did not know whether she belonged closer. Maya saw her first. The little girl looked at Adrian, then at the empty chair beside him. Adrian did not direct her. Maya crossed the aisle, took Evelyn by the hand, and led her forward. "You can sit here," Maya said. Evelyn looked at the chair, then at Adrian. "Are you sure?" Maya considered the question with the seriousness she brought to everything that mattered. "You have to stay when things get hard." Evelyn's eyes filled, but she did not look away. "I will." Maya pulled out the chair. When her turn came, she stood beside a model of apartment buildings, a library, a playground, and wide sidewalks lined with tiny paper trees. At the center was a small house with 3 figures standing outside. This time, none of them had been drawn in pencil. "My project is called A Place Where No One Gets Left Behind," Maya told the audience. "It is designed for families who need safe homes, but it is also about something my dad taught me. A strong building needs more than a beautiful outside. It needs every part to hold when pressure comes." Adrian lowered his eyes for a moment. Evelyn sat very still beside him. After the presentation, the 3 of them walked into the cool evening together. Near the parking lot, Evelyn stopped and told Adrian she would understand if friendship was all he could offer. Adrian looked at Maya, who was balancing the model carefully in both hands, then back at Evelyn. "I cannot promise where this goes," he said, "but I can promise we will not build it on fear." He extended his hand. Evelyn reached toward it, but before their fingers met, Maya placed her small hand between theirs. Adrian smiled. Evelyn did too. They walked the rest of the way to the truck like that, not as a perfect family, not as a finished story, but as 3 people choosing to remain present while something honest began again. Adrian had once walked away from a fortune to protect his daughter. In the end, he gained something money could never purchase. A woman willing to earn her place beside them, a child who knew she would never be abandoned, and a future built not on power, but on the quiet promise that when love was tested, no one would be asked to disappear.